going to begin. Okay, so let's see. Can you see my screen? Okay, sounds good. Let me go to full view. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Susy Benitez. I am currently a third year here at UCR, majoring in sociology with a minor in Latin American studies. My faculty mentor is Dr. Nahira, department chair and associate professor within the ethnic studies department. And today, the title of my presentation is Examining Undocumented Mexican Parents, K through 5th grade educational involvement. So to preface this presentation, it's important to explain why I use the phrase undocumented to refer to the community who I work with, but also who informs and who this research centers on. And so the phrase undocumented describes the immigration situation of a person born in another country who is navigating through the US without government issued documentation. And so the reason or the significance as to why I use undocumented is because it humanizes these people and their experiences by viewing them as their character as opposed to their status. Therefore, if you have questions at the end, I ask that you use the phrase undocumented to refer to this community, since a word like illegal would criminalize and dehumanize them and their experiences as well. And so with that, we get into the literature review. So it's important to mention that this project is interdisciplinary. It pulls from various disciplines, education particularly, and also sociology, and understanding how status impacts how people navigate and what the structural limitations that they have to undergo to be able to survive and thrive in a hostile society. And so with that, one of the elements that comes up within my literature that I've that I'm doing, right, is like the parental school involvement and what that means. Now, parental school involvement, the way that it's defined is by the participation and essentially physical presence that parents are able to have at the schools that their children go to. And so what this can look like is, for example, going to assist like teachers throughout the day with tasks that they have, also going to like being a part of parent committees, so like PT, I think wait, are they PTOs or PTAs? One of those. And then also going to like school nights, being able to go to like school events and being part of like the larger student or being a part of the larger parent school community, but also having and maintaining those relationships with school personnel, whether it's school teachers, but also school administrators. And so with this aspect, although parent involvement is intended, it's encouraged, but it's intended to be like neutral, and that it's not supposed to impact how teachers essentially connect with students and like their educational success. There is a correlation in seeing that that attitudes from teachers do shift if their parents are involved. And so that then goes back to the educational success that the student is able to have. And so with this aspect of being able to be involved in or being able to be physically present at the school that your child goes to, the issue of time and having access to time comes in. And so then that particularly then links to socioeconomic status, and how socioeconomic status is really a determinator in which you are able to be physically, if you're able to have the parental school involvement that the school and school personnel expect you to have with your child's education. And so another thing that comes up is the type of labor that undocumented people tend to perform. So due to status and as a result of status and not having a social security number, the access to employment is very restricted. And so many undocumented folks, they tend to work jobs that are very exploitive, are very low wage paying, but also are very long hours. And so with that, that's really significant in that many parents have to work multiple jobs. As we can see in the statistic that I have right here, undocumented parent, undocumented people tend to earn 14 to 24% less than their documented peers. And so that's really significant once again, as it just goes to further show how this access of like time and being able to take time off from work isn't accessible to undocumented parents. And so then this notion, or that connects to parental school involvement, in that parent or teachers who see that parents aren't involved or aren't physically present at the school believe that parents don't care. And so connecting that to undocumented parents, since due to these limitations of not being able to take time off from work, but also having other obligations, right? They are tend to be perceived that they don't care about their child's education. And so that leads me to the focus that I'm having, or that I have within this project, which is undocumented Mexican parents and their educational involvement. And so from personal experience and growing up in a Mexican household, right, having a Mexican parents, going to a school that was predominantly Mexican students, I noticed that there were a lot of, when it came to like specifically like the open house nights, like the following day after, our teachers would be like very disappointed, and they would mention this, and the way that they talked about this was like, you should encourage your parents to come to these events because that shows that they care. And so this element and this misconception that Mexican parents don't care is then further perpetuated. And that is really, I think, going back to what the literature says, Mexican parents and within the Mexican community, Mexican culture, it is found that they have a very high importance on education. So there's a disconnect there. And so that is what I seek to explore within my project, in how the question isn't no longer is like, why don't Mexican parents care? Rather, it's how do Mexican parents care? And so that is what I seek to explore with undocumented Mexican parents and their educational involvement, which leads me to my research questions, which are, how do undocumented parents of Mexican origin experience their children's elementary schooling? The second being, what non-traditional skills do parents employ to help their children navigate elementary school? And the third being, how do parents experiences challenge what it means to be educationally involved in their child's education? And so with this, it's important to explain that the theoretical framework in which I approach this project, but also in which I approach like the information that I plan to learn from parents is through the community cultural wealth theory. And so this theory is coined by Tarayoso, or Dr. Tarayoso, and it's important to also state that within this theory, it's rooted in critical race theory, which acknowledges oppressive racist structures that that frame communities of color and in a negative light, but also view them through a deficit perspective. And so within this theory, particularly since it's centered on critical race theory, it counters that, and it seeks to highlight the knowledge and the wealth within these communities of color, particularly like the cultural knowledge and the experiential knowledge that they have and that they've had for centuries, right? And that they cultivate and intergenerationally passed down. And so there are 6 tenets. Today I will be focusing on 3. And so with those, the first one being linguistic capital. And so the way that linguistic capital is framed is pretty much like the language that's used within the home, right? And so how parents talk to the conversations that parents have with their children, but also these like non-traditional forms of communication that aren't appreciated by the traditional model of cultural capital. And so an example of that could be like proverbs, specifically like these like short sayings, right, that are significant and a form of advice that students or their children can take with them, and that it can inform how they understand and how they view the world. And so the second being social capital, and so that refers like to the social networks that parents have, but also the ones that they tap into when they need further like assistance or guidance. And so the way this can be seen in this project can be like in a form of when they need to fill out a particular form for school, then if they go to someone from the school particularly who they are comfortable speaking with. Or for example, if their child has a question or doesn't really understand their homework, tapping into someone from the community who would be able to provide further assistance with that. And so the last one being navigational capital. And so navigational capital really centers on how they navigate through these structures and what do they employ to navigate. And so for example, this can be seen through like physically navigating. One example of that could be like using the public transportation system. And so knowing how to use the public transportation system, as there are many nuances within that. For example, like the bus schedule isn't always accurate, right? But like if you don't have that knowledge, then you're going to get there like on the time that it says, but it won't arrive then. And so having that awareness, but also using it to attain your goals. And so then we move on to the methodology. So the methodology that I'll be employing within this project is a snowball sample. It's particularly with ethnographic interviews. And so really through these ethnographic interviews, I seek to learn more about the experiences from parents, and I plan to conduct these during the summer of 2021. So this summer, and that is all dependent on when and if the IRB gets approved. So wish me great success in that process. And then the significance of this project is that it will expand discourse. As mentioned, literature on when when reviewing literature, it's really limited in finding this intersection between mixed status families and the connection to education, particularly with elementary school. There is literature on like immigrant families, but it's important to not make the assumption that immigrants are undocumented, as many immigrants do have status or do have citizenship or legal permanent residency, or form of that. And so essentially to expand discourse and then challenge stereotypes, improve institutions of education and educators. And so what that could look like is improving the curriculum, but also having more intentional training in regard to how to outreach to this community and truly reframe how we understand educational involvement, but also understand like how they are contributing to their child's education. And so here are my references. If you'd like it, I'm going to move on to the next slide, but if you'd like them, I can send them to you. And then if we have questions, please let me know. I will stop sharing and then I will stop recording.